retaliate militarily against Iran, and you may just be sitting looking at and worrying about what Iran's doing. Now, further complicating this is that there's a great debate on how long it would take Iran to make a nuclear weapon, and a lot of the debate is centered over how long to make a warhead for a ballistic missile, or how long to recreate this crash nuclear weapons program and rebuild the facilities that were abandoned or dismantled, and that kind of gives an outside bound of 2 years or so, maybe a little longer, that they could recreate what's called the Ahmad Plan and serially produce warheads for ballistic missiles. At the other end is, let's say they just want a crude nuclear explosive and let everyone wonder how many they have and how good they are. And that's a little scarier because if you look at what they've accomplished in the Ahmad Plan, um, and look at the tasks that were not finished for a crude weapon, it's not that many. And so I've assessed it could get to that point in 6 months. Now, that's their clock. And that's starting T equals zero. They start working on the weaponization. They may not divert the enriched uranium till month 4. I mean, they can make so much so quickly. Why not do it as late as possible? And then they would need a month or so to convert it into the weapon grade uranium into metal, and then metal components for the bomb. Um, but the problem is, our clock could be very different. What if our clock is when they divert the material? Then it's 2 months to the bomb according to our clock, and that's not a lot of time to react. And and there and I think until this horrible tragedy that of Hamas's attack against Israel, um, I think there was a lot of belief that the Israeli intelligence community really had it down of what Iran is doing. I think you naturally have to raise questions whether they would know if Iran decided to move toward building a bomb. Um, Iran certainly would be taking precautions, and and so and you certainly wonder if the U.S. could do it. Um, so you could have this gap between when Iran starts working on making a crude nuclear explosive, and then when it's actually detected, and it may be when they go to divert enriched uranium to make weapon grade uranium. So I think um, the timelines are shrinking, and here with what's going on in the Middle East now, you for the first time, I think in a long time, have a credible scenario of Iran building nuclear weapons and feeling it can get away with it.
All right, and let's get to some policy conclusions real quick, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I know we have Jonathan Landay from Reuters standing by with a question, I believe, and everybody is welcome to submit questions in the chat as well. So, David, summing up, what can be done about this diplomatically, economically, perhaps militarily?
Well, it's kind of a discouraging point in time. I mean, normally the IA makes these warnings multiple times. Often it's not heard the first time, or there's hesitation. But here it's the IA making a real clear statement that Iran is stonewalling, and there's no intention to cooperate on these basic safeguards issues. Continues building up its nuclear program, nuclear weapons capabilities, and normally the Board of Governors would refer this issue to the Security Council. It would be a condemnation of Iran's behavior. That would be followed up under the JCPOA provisions for a snapback. I mean, we're going to revert back to 2015. All sanctions, international sanctions go back on. Missile embargoes reestablished. The arm embargoes reestablished. The UN Security Council says Iran should not have any enrichment program at all. So it's an illegitimate program. And then you start from there, building up pressure or finding negotiations, but the whole international community is put on notice that it's supposed to put pressure on Iran's illegitimate enrichment program. And so that's what you would expect at this point. Um, but for reasons that are hard to finally understand, I don't expect it to happen at this meeting. There's this timidity in the Biden administration. Um, they're scared of that Iran will retaliate. The Europeans follow the U.S. lead on this, and so I think there'll be some strong statements, but there won't be this movement to really reset back to 2015 and start the pressure and the attempt to negotiate a more meaningful deal in line with what the Biden administration set out to do, a longer, stronger deal. So I think it's bad news for the IA. This is a body blow to its credibility, which is tragic. It's a very important international institution. We need it in other cases. And that if it's not supported in its time of need, then it really suffers. So the first thing that I think has to happen is the U.S. has to start realizing that it can take strong actions, and Iran will back down. Just like it's not rushing to help Hamas now. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, we deal with this in a lot of different levels in governments. There's a lot of people. If Iran starts to make movement to attack, a lot of people would like to devastate its military industries. I mean, really hammer its nuclear and missile programs and set it back years in its ability to lash out as it's prone to do. So it's scared. It's hesitating, and I think the lesson of this crash nuclear weapons program is when the U.S. forces were in Iraq in 2003. One of the inadvertent consequences of that none of us understood at the time, because it was a very secret nuclear weapons program, is they got scared in Iran and they cut it back. They were really nervous. So I think Iran is not in a strong position, but it talks a big talk. It loves to bluster and threaten and do all kinds of things, but in the end, it's not very strong, and it needs to be pushed against pretty hard. And yeah, they're going to retaliate, but in the end, it has to be very clear to them that if they make a move to nuclear weapons, there will very quickly be a devastating military strike. I mean, that's what we're left with now, and that if you're not willing to support the IAEA, then the United States has got to support Israel and make sure that this program is severely set back, and other parts of its programs, military programs, are set back if they move to build the bomb. And I think Iran, given that it's in a sense, or as I've said, is does not have a very strong hand, um, will refrain.
All right, David, question from the audience. Do you think the likelihood of snapback has increased in light of the attacks on Israel by Iran's allies? After all, the snapback would be a mechanism for building up a lot of pressure in a short space of time.
Well, this is from Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, Reuters reported that um, your colleagues reported that maybe were on the story too, that the message they're getting last week out of Europe is less likely um, to do snapback because of fear of Iran escalating. So I think that this is the problem of this timidity. And from my point of view, I've worked on several cases where IA inspections sounded an alarm, and it led to member states acting um, quite strongly. Um, this and some of the same member states, United States, European countries, this timidity is a real problem, and it's causing, I think, it encourages Iran to move further down the path toward nuclear weapons, and so it's long overdue for strong condemnations and by the board of governors and moving towards snapback. But I'm not optimistic, and I don't think, and I think that the the messages we're getting, there's the Reuters story, other things, is they're not powers that be in the United States and the Europeans are timid and probably won't do anything. So hopefully I'm wrong, um, and I think there should be a lot of pressure put on the governments to start supporting the international institutions that they work so hard to create and not watch them uh, be severely weakened.
All right, I'm having trouble bringing Jonathan in here, but we'll continue to work on that. And meanwhile, David, here's another question. If an Iranian site is attacked by a bomb with the current state of technology in Iran, is there a risk of radioactive radiation affecting the population?
No, not really. And I think if they had a reactor operational that was going to be attacked, yeah, then the risk goes way up of a large amount of radioactive material that can get into the environment. Um, but they have an enrichment program. They have enriched uranium, and it's a very weak radioactive material. And again, uranium's everywhere. It's dispersed throughout the Earth's crust. It's in seawater, and so it takes a tremendous amount of it before it can have an impact on a person. Um, and so the risk, if let's say the enriched uranium stocks, let's say that are stored at the Esfahan site, if those were destroyed, I mean, in the end, Sarah gave the numbers, 125 kilograms or so of 60%. That's not going to pose any risk at all. The fluorine, it's in a hexafluoride form. Fluorine, it poses a toxic risk to anybody nearby, but the uranium isn't going to pose a risk. And if it's destroyed, they'll be using anti-armor munitions, which contain depleted uranium. Same in terms of radiation risk, the same kind, essentially the same kind of uranium, a little less radioactive than enriched uranium, but not much. And there may end up being used more anti-armor or uranium and anti-armor munition than is in the stock of 60%. So no, I don't think there's a risk.
All right, we have Jonathan's colleague Arshad with us right now. You want to go ahead and ask a question?
Thanks so much. And John, if you can hear this, shoot me your question on Teams and I will ask it as well. My question is, what is the utility of a potential snapback in a circumstance where the UN Security Council's, P5 are so divided and where China notably continues to purchase Iranian oil, albeit not with state-owned refineries, in defiance of U.S. Sanctions. What makes you think that China would necessarily or likely respect the snapback of UN sanctions when it is quite happy to flout U.S. sanctions?
Yeah, the point is to reset and make it international law that what China is doing is unacceptable, and 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 also reestablish the missile embargo and the arms embargo. Now, it is a split council, and so it's not going to be as effective as it certainly could be, but it allows countries to start taking actions, and many countries do insist on having a UN Security Council resolution in place before they'll really act. So I think it just provides a better basis to push back against what China's doing on oil. It would certainly legitimize secondary sanctions. It would legitimize banks in countries that are touched by what China's doing to start refusing payments or transactions. So I think it's the idea is to reestablish a new baseline that then would allow movement forward. Because one of the arguments China makes is essentially as well, the U.S. has violated, Iran's violated it. Who cares? And so you want to create a clear baseline, as I said, in order to move forward. And in this, the United States will have to take a leadership, but I think in Iran, I'm sorry, the Europeans would be in a under much more obligation to take action. Then if there is military strikes, I mean, if that's what it comes to, they're much more legitimized if there's a UN Security Council resolution that says Iran's program is not legitimate.
You know, Jonathan has just sent me his question. If I may, I'd like to read it. Do you believe that Iran is limiting its involvement in the Israel-Hamas war to avoid giving Israel an excuse to bomb its nuclear facilities? And to what extent do you think that the war is consuming Israeli intelligence and other spy agencies so that they cannot keep eyes on the Iranian program to the extent that they have done?
Yeah, and the latter, and I'm sorry, I thought Jonathan asked the previous question two questions ago. Yeah, I think the Iran is worried about being attacked, and I think while Iran has kind of a unique opportunity to go for the bomb, um, it also knows that it risks um, a military strike um, if it escalates the war. Um, Israel may strike preemptively against Iranian nuclear and missile facilities. So yeah, I think it cuts both ways. Now, um, on the Israeli intelligence, yeah, I worry about it. I mean, it was a pretty big failure, and and the Hamas um, was able to take out a lot of the observation equipment with using fairly simple or commercially available and relatively inexpensive drones, where they outfitted them with grenades, and so I think it's very worrisome, um, and have to question whether Israel has enough insight into the Iranian program that it could detect a secret weaponization program that's marching toward a breakout. So yeah, I do worry about it a lot. Um, and I think because of the concern about military strikes, Iran is going to do it in a way that's, at least the first phase of it, I believe, would be done very secret, but also build in deniability if you're caught. Um, there most people would see through it, but not everybody, and it may give pause in terms of let's say the U.S. supporting military strikes by Israel. So I think we have to we have to worry, and that's why also the IA is so important in all this. That they in a sense, I mean, it's kind of a trite phrase now and kind of meaningless almost, but they are the boots on the ground, and they can find out things that intelligence communities can't. Um, and we've lost that for sure now.
All right. Any more questions from the team over at Reuters? I think we're good on that front. David, another one from the audience goes to a potential scenario where Iran might have smuggled nuclear material for a quote unquote dirty bomb type of attack to Lebanon. Do you find that kind of scenario feasible or not?
I don't know why Hezbollah would try that. I mean, of course, anything's possible. I mean, there's radioactive sources all over the world. Iran has many of them. They're not safeguarded like nuclear material, so I mean, it wouldn't be hard for a state to get quite a bit of radioactive material and move it around and can even say it's for medical purposes or radiate, whatever, something, food or kill insects. I mean, use cobalt 60, very powerful radioactive source. But I don't see what's in it for them. I just don't. I don't see why they would do it, and it would, given that it, if used, would be terrifying. Everyone rightly worries about radiation, and a radiological source would be giving off gamma radiation, which is very penetrating, unlike uranium. Um, it would cause a lot of panic and in essence, empty a territory of some size, perhaps not huge, but still significant. And I think it would lead to a very harsh Israeli reaction. So I think that that would be one thing I don't think they would do, but yeah, I mean, people should think about it. And I would hope radiation sensors in Israel are fully activated, um, so that if it does happen, the evacuations and countermeasures can be taken as quickly as possible.
All right, David, we have time for one more question, and I'll try to couple a couple of questions in the chat together here. If you could talk a little more about the different clocks Iran might be on when it comes to developing a crude weapon or advanced delivery capability. You mentioned in your paper last year a 6-month timeline for a crude weapon and a 2-year timeline, roughly speaking, for advanced delivery. Could it be that some of these clocks have already started? So not just Iran racing undetected towards a crude weapon, but that they are further along than we think on the weaponization side?
Oh, and we would, as I think, yes, could be. And Arshad and Jonathan had asked the question about, do we know, does Israel intelligence know what's going on? And questions about that now. So yeah, of course, that is a conclusion that they could be doing things now that are undetected by intelligence communities and certainly by the IAEA. In the end, the IAEA, what it can detect is if Iran moves to divert enriched uranium. It may not be automatic. They're not there every day. They may be denied access to the site, but ultimately they'll know within a couple of weeks that a diversion has taken place. But yeah, it's worrisome. Now, the 2 year is the recreation of the Ahmad plan, and then Iran could serially produce warheads for ballistic missiles, couple to 2 to 4 in a year. So the 2 years is needed to solve some problems in the weaponization part and in rebuilding facilities, to make the weapons components on a mass scale, relative to Iran. And now, what if they just crashed on a warhead for a ballistic missile? I mean, there's some Israelis, from a school I've talked about a year, I believe, if I'm not misquoting him. Um, you know, others have talked about that kind of time frame, but it's just rushing to get a warhead as fast as possible, um, and you probably can't mass produce them at that point in time, and you may have some reliability issues. So the 2 year estimate is that they go back to this very detailed step by step approach that was in the Ahmad plan to get to the point of having reliable warhead that could be mass produced. So so that kind of explains the range. Um, but there are uncertainties. But I do think the 2 year is for mass production capability, and 6 months to me is for a crude. Now, I've heard estimates from people in the European intelligence community. They think 6 months is enough for a warhead for a ballistic missile. I mean, it's pretty crudely tested, in the sense that you you test subcomponents and make sure everything works. But I've heard estimates, at least some of the analysts think, my estimates are too slow, too short. But I would argue with them and feel that these estimates are reasonable.
All right, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to end this space here. Please feel free to follow up with questions directly interacting with our Twitter account. Again, you can find the two new reports, our analysis of them on our website. And I would encourage you also to look at David's paper from last year on the time to a weapon, which provides a lot more detail. Again, thanks, David. Thanks, Sarah, for excellent analysis as always. We did have an additional question regarding whether the new analysis here is going to move the needle on our Geiger counter that we publish every 6 months or so with an overall threat assessment focused on Iran. And I think the answer has to be stay tuned. We plan to publish the next Geiger counter in mid-December. So please follow along on our handle here and on our website for the latest Geiger counter again coming out next month. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and have a great day.